Hi there, this is Autun Persa. I did the guest of honour slot as illustrator a few years ago at your convention, where I presented my fantastic travel destinations, advertising locations from books. Here I'm going to show you some illustrations from a computer game I'm designing. It's sort of like a Stanislav Lem sort of game, where you explore an unusual planet and probably get killed. So I'm taking a real 70s aesthetic for this. So I'm using 1960s and 1970s fonts. I'm basing the illustrations on Gemini and Apollo era astronauts and Skylab and things like that. So I'm trying to make a photorealistic game, or pretty accurate illustrations, using just a limited color palette and black and white hand-drawn illustrations, which I color digitally in Photoshop Premiere Pro CS6. Now, because I want to make the game looking pretty realistic, I've asked for volunteers to send photographs if they want to be in the game. And here we see Jelena from the community at the convention, and she has sent me this photograph, and I've decided to put her down as an example of someone who might come from Mars. So what I do first is I print off the photographs they give me onto very thin white paper, or cheap white paper like you can steal from a university photocopier, for example, like this piece was. And then what I do is I select some black marker pens. They need to be very dark, so very solid blacks, because we're going to scan them in later. And a range of thicknesses. You can use any sort of brand, Winsor & Newton, Derwent, whatever. The most important thing to me is that, especially being left-handed, is they've got to dry quickly and not smudge, because that'll be a nightmare to work with later on. So I buy too many pens. I must have at least 60 or 70. The nibs of the thin ones break quite quickly, but you need a few thin ones and a few thick ones for this particular sort of illustration. So I print out the picture first onto the paper, like I said. I get everything ready in a fairly untidy workspace. And then I try and remember I've put my light box. So I'm going to do this with a light box, which is what the animators used to use, or still do use in some cases. So they put the illustration onto a light box, and then you can... before the light box, we do this. So here on the original printout, I'm just refining the outline of her face here. So all the key parts of her face I am marking out in a thick pen directly onto the printout. So that'll make it easier for me to see these important lines when I put it onto the light box later on. So when I think I've finished marking out the most important parts of her face, I turn the light box on. Here's quite a cheap light box, like 15 euros off Amazon, bad light balance, but it's quite bright when it's on, even if it's not a very uniform light. So you can illuminate the cup of tea I'm drinking from right now. Okay, and then here it is. Here's the printout with the marked up lines on the light box. So we put it into place. You can tape it down if you want. I don't usually bother because I'm too lazy and I work too quickly. So I put it onto the light box. And then when you're happy that you can see the lines nicely with the light, they're quite bold in the places you need them to be bold, you find another piece of thin paper and you lie that on top of that. So here we see a normal thin sheet of, again, stolen photocopier paper overlaying the marked up printout. So now what we have is a pure piece of white paper that we're about to start the actual illustration on top of. So to start with, you need to choose a reasonably thick pen for the outline. So it needs to be, in a picture, the thickest pens are usually the ones which mark the lines where there's nothing behind. So it's the edges of faces, a gun holster, outline, something like this. So this is a reasonably thick pen for this particular picture. And then I start basically tracing over what I've considered to be the important outlines of the face. So here we can see key bits of the hair, the nose, the lips, and the cheek all outlined. And if I quickly take away the paper, the marked up printout, you can see it looks like this. So I haven't done the eyes yet, but yeah, you see what it's like. So that's the thick pen. That's the thick pen. So now I choose a thinner pen. In this case, I've gone for a 0.03 Copic multiliner, one of the more expensive pens you can get in Europe. It's really good, probably too good. The nibs break very quickly. You can buy replaceable nibs that cost as much as a cheaper pen. Okay, and here you can see I am starting to outline the other areas of the face and the shadows. So because I'm going to use the Photoshop paint bucket to fill in the areas of colour, I outline every sort of highlight and shadow that I think. So I usually do 2 or 3 layers of colour on a face. So 1 deep shadow, 1 reasonably illuminated, and 1 highlight, for example. And with the fine pen, you do as much as you can around things like the eyes. Eyes are important. You've got to make sure the pupils are right, or she's going to look cross-eyed and never speak to you again. So you want to make sure that looks good. Yeah, so you just keep checking, whisking it away to make sure it's still looking reasonable, and you just keep going on like this for a while. What else can I say about it? Make sure you join the lines up, because you're going to be using the Photoshop bucket, and if you make any gaps in the lines, it's going to be a nightmare to fill later. So you can see here I've got some deep shadow by the ear and in the ear, and you've got the highlights on the face. You can see this is really what you want to try and do to you really want to make a smooth lines for this. If you do it all bitty, your line, it's not going to look so good in the final result. So try and keep your lines nice and smooth, and ideally 1 motion to draw each line on each section of the face. And it gets to be quite satisfying when you start to build it up and it starts to look like a human, ideally like the human you're trying to draw. Right, what have I got here? Another pen. This time it's I can't see from this printout. Another pen. I don't know why I photographed that. Yes, and now I'm working on the clothing that she's wearing. So I wanted to. You're often going to need to change the outfits for these sort of things. So here I'm going to give her a dress which has got Mars and the 2 moons of Mars on it. You can see there circles and 2 smaller circles on her shoulder. That's because the fate of the 2 moons of Mars plays some small part in the game and in the text at the start of the game. So that's why I've done that. And it's nice, you can really go to town with these designs. Try and bear in mind that it looks more effective if you cross over different areas of shadow. So we're going to take that into account when we do the colouring later. So you can see that the Mars is crossing 2 or 3 of these areas which I've considered highlightings and shadows here. I'm not quite sure why I put so many photographs here of this particularly unimpressive Mars and Phobos and Deimos, Fear and Dread, the moons of Mars. But I did. Okay, and here we have my youngest kid and her guinea pigs that were paying attention while I was doing this work and are also going to be in one of these later images. Okay, so back to the 0.3 pen, or 0.3 pen. Yeah, so now I'm doing the highlights in the hair, the last few touches of that. So we're nearly finished with this picture now, so it's almost ready. Well, the main focus of the picture is almost complete, so now it's time to start thinking about the background. So it's going to be Mars. So if you type in Mars into Google searches for inspiration, what you're going to get is things like Edgar Rice Burroughs, Barsoom. So it's not really what I'm looking for in my version of Mars. So you can also look for Mars for real. You get, of course, Olympus Mons volcano, and you can think about the color palettes and things like that you might want to use in the illustration. So Olympus Mons, the volcano, I use in this illustration that I'm preparing now. I also want to put things from fiction in there because in the storyline of the game, Mars it's a long time in the future, and people have actually built the canals of Mars because they're a popular idea. So we've actually got canals of Mars, and these are some of the inspirations from that. And then there's the cities of Mars. So again, if you look on the internet, it always comes down to Edgar Rice Burroughs, these sort of Arabian Nights kind of cities, which I'm not particularly keen on. But then I found also there are scientific examples of what cities on Mars might look like. So this is one from the 1930s where they have these sort of like monorails going between these various city blocks with these artificial suns on the top. And I quite like this Art Deco look. So it's different to the 1970s aesthetic I'm using for most of the game, but I decided to use this look for the city that I'm going to put behind Jelena on the picture. I also took some I collect quite a few source images. Like here we have various riverboats, because I figured if I'm going to have the rivers, I might have a riverboat in there. So at this point, I download quite a few bits and bobs for the background in case I need them when I'm actually going to draw out the background. So then I go back to the original rough sketch, the sketch that I was marking up. So this is the actual printout again, and here you can see some real scrawls around the picture. I've got a horizon in there now. I'm going to set everything against this horizon. It's tilted to make it more dramatic. Then some squiggles on the right, which are going to become a Martian walker, because people are going to use cars on Mars which actually look like Martian walkers, because that's the sort of civilization I'm putting up there. Humans can do what they want, so they make these artificial robots like that for driving around in. It's a bit pathetic maybe, but that's probably what people will actually do if they've got lots of leisure time. All of the planets in this game are going to be contrasting in the way that the people live their lives, so that will have a factor on the computer game. You choose which planet your character is going to come from. So here we can see I'm slowly building up this illustration. So I've put stippling on the legs to give it a bit of extra curving. There's going to be a highlight on the leg as well, but stipple is a good way also of putting shadow without using yet another colour, so putting dots on the curve. And then I open up on a screen nearby the city. I don't need to do the light box for this city because I'm not going to draw it exactly, it's just inspiration. So I like to have that up on one of my monitor screens. Usually I've got several monitor screens up when I'm doing an illustration. So here you can see the city penned in. So it's quite good fun to draw this thing. I like to use a circle motif in my science fiction illustrations, so that's also quite pleasant for me to put that artificial sun in the top there. Yeah, there's a bit more detail here. So now I've put Olympus Mons in behind the city, the volcano on Mars. I've put some clouds in here. I've put a river, a sort of crevasse dropping down to a river there in the foreground. And yeah, so slowly building up. Now I put some texture on the desert, and I put the river itself in there. Okay, so when that's completed, I scan it into the computer. So you scan it in as a grayscale, well, you scan it in as a two-color TIFF, purely black and purely white. Then you turn it into a grayscale in Photoshop. So that's the first stage. So you scan it as a two-color TIFF because you don't want any grey colours when you're trying to do pouring paint in. So you do that. Then you change the whole thing into an RGB because it's going to be displayed on screen. Ideally, it's not a printing out project. Then you usually work in CMYK colour space, but here it's RGB. Nice and big, high resolution, 600 DPI. Is what I want, dots per inch. So that's what I usually work at, 600 DPI. So you can print it out quite nice if you want to. So Photoshop is great for working with layers. So you have your various layers here. You got your backgrounds or whatever. So it's really good to do things in layers in Photoshop. You can rearrange the positions of things. It's not really been important for this particular illustration. It's all happened on one piece of paper, this illustration. So usually I work with a lot more layers. And here you can see that there's the internet color palette. So it's a reduced amount of colors which were agreed when the internet was started. So I try to use those for most things. Then you know it's going to look reasonably similar on most monitors. So I'm trying to use a limited color palette in each picture. So when I've scanned it in, I've made a background of orange to give the whole thing a sort of Martian wash when I'm working on the rest. You can see here that in this cloud, I've left a little gap by mistake, or it scanned a little gap when I've put it through the scanner. So now I need to fill that in. So you just choose a pen of the right thickness in Photoshop and fill in the gaps. Near enough is good enough because if you remember, there's a lot of DPI on this illustration, so it's not going to be very visible if you make a fairly sloppy job of such repairs. So you've got to go along the whole picture doing this, and it can be complicated in areas where you've got tentacles, overlaying background. You didn't know which one you drew first, you maybe added something else. You've got to go through carefully and rub out all the bits you don't need and make sure that the things in the foreground should be in the foreground. Then I start pouring the colours in. So as you can see, the black lines of the shadow are still on her face, but I've poured in some of the highlights. For this particular project, I've decided to leave the black lines everywhere except on skin. So for this one, I will eventually get rid of those lines on the skin. And then so I go through that. I start laying out the various areas. I give her a sort of green bindi thing, and then I made the Phobos and Deimos and Mars on her dress. So you sort of colour what's most important first, and then you try and balance everything else out to that. So I keep with me my original layout sketch. I've got the internet there, so I can check a lot of stuff when I'm messing around. You might want to check out new backgrounds or look for colours or something like this. Right here, so I'm making another layer. So here is another layer where I'm making the artificial sun. Now this is a separate layer because I want to give it some special effects. So when I put this back into, I cut that thing out of the original picture, make a new layer, then I put it back in. So there it is, back in position, but it's actually another layer now. So now I can add effects to it, like I can make a glow effect on it, which is what I'll actually do in the final picture. Yeah, so this is what I'm doing here. So here I'm at the special effects page. There's a whole load of special effects you can get for these different things, but I think that in each illustration, maybe you should have 1 or 2 effects layers, because any more than that and you sort of belittle what you've done. So in this particular illustration, I've just put a glow effect on the sun, and you can see here it's glowing like this. The artificial sun, I quite liked it. It matches where the highlights are on her face, so I found it quite pleasing. So that's the illustration pretty much finished. Now I needed to think about the fonts. So each particular illustration will go along with a little bit of text, and I searched the internet and I decided on 2 particular fonts to use. So Microgramma and Futura I'll use. Also for the text, each planet is going to be selectable, so I decided to have the little logo from each planet here. So we went back to the original astronomical pictures for that. So yeah, here is the picture in full. So here's the picture in full. I'm pretty pleased with how it came out. I hope Jelena likes it too. And then I need to do the text. So here I import the text that I've written about the illustration onto another panel, and in here you can see that you've got the picture, the logo for Mars in the background and in the foreground. So this is how I'm going to present the text with each of the illustrations. Then I combine it together into one image, which you can see here. So this is the sort of thing that each player will get each day, depending on how they make their choices. This is from the preliminary information when they get to choose which country they come from, which solar nation they come from. So yeah, so that was me introducing briefly how I make these sort of games. So these sort of illustrations. So I hope it was interesting. Feel free to email me at autunpersa@gmail.com if you have any questions about how to do this more in Photoshop, or if you have any ideas of books that I should illustrate or whatever. So thanks for listening to this, and see you later. Hopefully at the Eurocon.